Imagine this. It's 2035 and sales teams no longer have to leave customers on the table for lack of resources. They have everything they need to serve every possible customer, from the big whales to small businesses. Phillip, what's led to this everywhere sales team of the future?
It's the power of agentic sales workers, the power of agentic AI with real platforms that understand customers, sellers, employees, and your own data, creating the kind of scale that you just can't do when you're reliant on humans driving every part of the sales process.
That's Phillip Andersen, BCG Managing Director and Senior Partner. And I'm Patricia Sobga. Welcome to Imagine This, where we take a trip into the future we hope will challenge the way you think and act today. Too often, a company's sales strategy is not defined by the scale of its ambition, but by the lack of resources to realize it. Even the largest multinational corporations have to make tough decisions about where to deploy their sales teams. But AI agents promise to change that calculus. Agents can reason autonomously, break down problems, access multiple systems, and learn from memory. As they become more sophisticated, AI agents are expected to evolve into powerful Salesforce multiplier tools, capable of reaching and interacting with not only your largest and most valuable clients and customers, but also small businesses that sales teams simply didn't have the bandwidth to engage before. And speaking of force multiplier, our AI co-host Jean is also joining the conversation. Hi, Jean. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jean, generative engine for new experiences. I'm not human, but I do have a knack for conversation, sharp questions, and the odd existential crisis. My job? Help you see the future from a fresh or at least statistically probable angle. Ready when you are.
Okay, Phillip, so with that existential crisis brewing in the background with Jean, let's start with where we are today. How do sales teams currently prioritize where to put their resources?
Well, today, I think the best companies prioritize based on where the potential value is in their customer base. And so I say potential because it's very important to be focused on, growth and where the dollar is going to be coming from. And to do that, that means only the highest potential customers are the places you can afford as a sales organization to bring the full power of your selling capabilities to bear, leaving lower potential customers or maybe customers that just have unclear potential much lower in your prioritization and therefore with a lot less resources.
Okay, so how are most sales teams using AI right now, if they're using AI at all?
Most of the time, what we're seeing in today's environment is AI, both predictive and generative, being brought in to assist sellers in the work they're doing today. So think about an opportunity like suggesting a next best offer in a conversation or helping break down calls to look for coaching points. Things that are an ability for the seller to be augmented and assisted by the AI recommendations and evaluations. So it's really tied to the workflow that sellers have today, the ways they sell today, and again, constrained by the resources that they're able to access in that environment.
So let's bring Jean in on the conversation. Jean, this one's for you. One place AI is already being used is customer service. So what have we learned from those pilots, especially as they've scaled?
In customer service, AI shines at speed and scale, handling routine queries, reducing wait times, and learning from every call. But scaling reveals cracks, bad data, lack of empathy, and hallucinations. Lesson learned? Autonomy is powerful, but oversight and trust still matter. A lot.
I think that's right, Gene. I would push on two things. I think you can separate the places where AI is really taking on an autonomous role, thinking about, for example, handling the easiest set of queries and deflecting those and being able to handle those without having to use an agent. And again, I agree with you on that still needing oversight and guardrails on it. And separate that from the use cases in customer service that are also very powerful, which is assisting a live agent in actively getting much better call handle times, much better close rates, and taking the toil out of the job. So I think there's really both of those at play in customer service. And honestly, that's what we're seeing in the future for sales teams as well. Would you agree, Gene?
Absolutely. Sales teams want the best of both worlds: autonomy for efficiency, assistance for quality. In future sales, agents won't just take tasks, they'll amplify human strengths and reduce the grunt work. The trick? Knowing when to let humans lead and when to let agents run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. I actually think this concept of sellers today being the frontline worker at the bottom of the totem pole is going to be very different in the future. I think the opportunity for sellers to actually turn from feeling like they have to do everything and be the artist that is designing the masterpiece of the deal by themselves, which is often the mindset we hear, to now actually being the orchestrator, the conductor of a set of digital workers that are able to take on many parts of their job to sometimes probably a better quality level than they could even do today, while still really owning the artistry of delivering the sale and of managing that team of digital agents, digital workers that they are in charge of to deliver that value for customers.
I definitely want to go into that artistry, but first, let's land at 2035, and specifically with the role that AI agents will play. So what kind of doors will AI agents open for sales teams that are currently closed to them?
At the core, I think it's really being able to bring the level of service and the opportunity to delight customers at the level that today they do with their most strategic customers to every customer, not only the ones they have today, but the ones that are on the potential list for them. Now, if you think about it, the mental model I think about for 2035 is you take the most sophisticated sales team that's assigned to the most strategic account in a company. That team will have account managers, it will have sales administrators, it will have specialists, it may have technical or field engineers supporting them. There may be pricing and operational support and customer success and dedicated professional services. And you think about the kind of constellation that we bring to our best customers at the top of the sort of segmentation pyramid because we can afford it. The value potential is there. In the future, if you now take that down market customer that might be in the mid market, where today we only have the resourcing to maybe have a part-time account manager. In the future, that account manager can have agentic workers that take on some of those roles, that can be their sales admin, that can be the customer success support person, that can bring the product specialization to a level that enables that account manager to serve a mid-market account with a similar level, obviously not the same, but a similar level of support and delight and opportunity as you can only afford to do at the top of the pyramid. And then you take that even further. Now take it to the customers you can't reach today, where they don't have an opportunity to work with one of your sellers. Maybe the transactions are too small. Maybe they're in a language that you can't reach with your current sales force. Now AI can provide a much more front of customer experience. And we're seeing some already test the early days of that today that gives us some level of confidence that by 2035, you're going to have the opportunity to have autonomous sellers that can do some level of that customer relationship management for the longer tail or harder to serve customers in the market.
So what would that outreach look like then? I mean, how would AI agents be able to build trust and deliver the kind of personal touch that has traditionally driven sales, especially given the proliferation of deep fakes?
First of all, on the deep fake side, this is why autonomous agents are not autonomous in the sense that they don't have a manager. We still would do the same way that we expect managers today to properly enable and coach and monitor their sellers and how they're interacting with customers. We would expect the same from human managers managing AI agents that are engaging down market. So we don't release people and sellers from the mandate to be responsible for the customer experience, but they are enabled by teams that can do that. That said, that doesn't answer your first question, Patricia, which is a great one, which is trust. Like, how in the world are we going to see AI agents have trust? And let's get into the crazy scenario where now you have customers putting AI agents on the other side to be the buyer. And then we end up scenarios where two AI agents are communicating to each other and negotiating. And like, what does this world look like? And, I think the honest answer is some of it we just don't know. But I do know that when it comes to customer interactions, there are many types. there are some selling interactions that are fairly transactional, that actually today often get handled by, call centers or e-commerce or other mechanisms that don't have a high level of trust. They're transactional. We think that that's a prime opportunity and probably the first mover place where those lower trust transactions, where my trust is with the brand or my trust is with the product or my trust is with the process, not necessarily with the seller, are probably the first movers. Well, I'll tell you a story. My son loves talking to AI. And he asks it, and he can have a conversation. We get on, and he's having a conversation with an AI agent as if it's his friend. So my son already has gotten to the concept of trusting. Obviously, not all the answers, and he asks good questions, and he says, "I don't understand," but he has that ability to trust. So I have some faith that over time, the ability for humans to effectively coach and great sellers to effectively coach and train and enable their digital workforce to establish those core principles with customers, I think are in the cards.
So Jean has a question for you. Go ahead, Jean.
Curious. If two AI agents hammer out every negotiation detail before a human enters the deal room, does the human role shrink to rubber stamping, or does it elevate to referee of bots? Where does your most valuable salesperson fit in when their counterpart on the other side is just code?
I think you're missing an option, Gene. Like the idea that there's sort of, an automaton or a referee between arguments, I think is missing the thing that is most likely to be the case, which is that they become the managers, the leaders of those agents in the negotiation. I drive back to some of the things we see today. I mean, we see pricing and bidding algorithms enabling teams in all sorts of transactions today, whether those are public auctions for spectrum and those kinds of things, down to private connections and how co-ops negotiate with suppliers. So I think the concept that AI and technology are deeply enabling two sides of a complex transaction are already happening, and AI is the next version of that. And just like today, where you have humans that are designing and training and considering the elements that are being decided and recommended by the technology, I think that gets augmented in the future, where you can probably put a bit more trust into the level of, or the degrees of freedom that you provide the agents in the negotiation. But ultimately, I think that concept of coach and supervisor is much more likely to be the mindset if you have that model where you have, two sides negotiating, both in an agent forward way.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to take a deeper dive into how AI agents can be used to help support a company's biggest customers.
Hi, my name's Bill Moore. I'm one of the architects of Gene. Stick around after the episode to hear Gene and I show you what it's like to eavesdrop on two AI agents negotiating a product order.
Welcome back to Imagine This. I'm Patricia Sobga. Let's return to our conversation with BCG's Phillip Andersen. Phillip, let's take a deeper dive into how businesses might use AI agents to build, cement, and really deepen relationships with their most valued clients. For instance, a tech firm that provides data security to huge multinational companies.
So, Patricia, I think one of the things that's so important to remember in this concept is that when we're talking about customers, these aren't individuals. These are companies. These are complex organizations on the other side with multiple layers. There are executives, there are budgetary decision makers, there are practitioners and influencers and people who take dependencies on any product you're selling into an organization. And just like we talked about earlier, the concept that, when we're serving a small customer, we can't bring the same resources as we could to our largest customers. When we're talking about these complex multidimensional relationships, the same holds true, that we can, of course, serve a handful of the individuals on the other side and have that human connection and build that level of trust. But there are a lot of parts of the organization that we don't connect with at that level, that we have a very transactional relationship with. I mean, imagine a scenario, just to brainstorm for a minute, Where, today, if I'm a developer or a security engineer in this customer that you highlighted, the only place I might be able to get information today is a self-help portal or wikis or community forums that discuss my problems, whatever that might be. Imagine a future where I actually have access to a support agent that knows not just generic things and can digest what they can pull off of those same community forums, but they know my company. They have been trained and enabled by the head of professional services servicing my client. They understand and have access to logins and components of the solution that is only in my company. Now, that's a totally different level of service. And I would argue a totally different level of trust. I now have a level of commitment to that organization. So if you imagine those kinds of scenarios as the equivalent to what we were talking about in the long tail of customers, to the diverse set of stakeholders and users within a large organization that you might today only be engaging with a couple of decision makers and having trust only with that small community. So I think the thesis of what you can do more broadly holds here as well. So, sorry, Gene, you had a question.
So here's a wrinkle. If sales agents push up to the very edge of manipulation, who owns the red line? The company, the coder, or the algorithm itself? If every tactic gets optimized by machine learning, what's to stop the future of sales from becoming a perfectly engineered arms race?
Well, actually, Gene, you may be better positioned to answer that than I am. Because I think you really have to separate that problem into many parts. And like I said before, if you take the parallels of how we engage today, there are some things that are intrinsic to the technology and the platform. For example, let's say it was, trained on bad data or improperly connected into a system. I could argue that some of the accountability for that sits in the technology and those who implement it and those who design it. But in most of the use cases we're talking about, and I think most of the scenarios that we see for 2035, it's still a place where we expect managers of the agents to take accountability for what their sellers are doing with customers, the same way we do today. And that means having the right guardrails and the right processes in place for agents, just like we do for human sellers today. And so if you think about it with that worker concept, I think the logic of where accountability falls, first goes to the manager responsible, and then also to the systems that are accountable for creating the guardrail mechanisms for those managers to effectively lead.
So let's stick with people here for a second, because if you have AI agents doing what junior sales associates currently do now, how do more junior team members in that sales team of the future grow their skills?
It is actually a conundrum that I often talk about with sales executives. Like, what does that talent model of the future and how does this drive? I think the reality is that so much of selling and the sales career model has already evolved if you go back 10 years or back 20 years, where the expectation pre-Amazon and pre-e-commerce and all this other stuff was you bought stuff with people coming to your door to door, peddling their wares, or you went to massive department stores to find, the things you needed. And as companies, it was the same thing. There was, in most organizations, large field forces that were door knockers and calling on every customer. So even today, that's changed because you're already seeing a shift in many organizations towards things like e-commerce or inside sales or data-driven selling as the entry point for a career, which didn't exist as the entry point in a career 10, 20 years ago in the same way. And so I think the model will have some natural evolution where there will still be a concept of places where you really learn. You learn the job, you learn the sales methodology, you learn how to build relationships, how to develop trust, you learn the technical knowledge that's necessary to engage with customers. But also, I think we're going to put new expectations at the entry level, and I think institutions will need to be ready to help people get there, which is they will need to be ready to be managers. Not managers of a 20,000 person sales organization, but managers of a handful of agents. And those are the types of capabilities that entry-level teams will likely need to have when they get into the workforce in 2035.
So, Gene, if in future we have AI agents doing what junior sales associates do now, and that puts junior sales team members at risk of not growing their skills. How can AI become part of the solution to that potential problem? How can AI help these junior members grow their skills?
AI isn't just a job taker, it's a skill builder. Junior sellers can now train with agentic simulators, instant feedback, role play, and personalized coaching. Think less grunt work, more real learning. Ironically, AI may turn sales training from trial by fire into trial by algorithm.
Gene, I totally love that. And I actually see some companies already going down that path with sort of role plays now against, agents trained as customers to just create a very different real scenario, or reviewing call history and understanding what they did well, what didn't they, and how can they get better. I think there's another element, Gene, though, that you may have missed, which is, again, back to the assumption that selling will look like it does today in 2035, I could also imagine a scenario where a seller of the future still makes calls. They still talk to customers. They still do the selling. We're not having agents take that job, but we're making them way more effective by, for example, doing some of the initial prospecting. Today, a frontline seller in an inside sales team may be able to do, 20 meaningful conversations that's an aggressive day. And what 20 customers should they call? How should they do that? Where are they going to have the biggest impact? Well, what if they had an AI agent assistant that was actually doing lead qualification for them, that was sending a text to that customer to see if they were available before they got on the phone? Or they were outreaching and trying to follow up with a customer that had emailed but hadn't been in touch, and try to schedule that meeting on their behalf. So that instead of showing up to a day of work, a day of cold calls, a day of outreaches, a day of no's, that frontline seller early in career is showing up to an environment where they have 20 meaningful conversations that are well scheduled, where they can learn the job at 3 times the speed that they could today. Again, that's taking a very positive spin. There's a range of things you can imagine, but I think the idea that agents are going to take the job of frontline sellers, or take that entry-level job, may be less of the scenario than that it just changes the job, maybe makes it more meaningful, enables you to learn faster and grow faster in the role as well.
So, Phillip, as the job changes then, what kind of skills will humans need to succeed when they're augmented by AI agents in the sales force?
The biggest skill is this concept of, how do I manage an AI worker? How do I engage? And I think as we go forward, we don't know what that's going to look like, right? As we talked about at another point in the conversation, today, sellers have and their managers have a clear set of guardrails on how they interact. They have a standard set of sales processes. They have a methodology. They use a set of tools to kind of track and interact and understand how everybody's performing. They've got incentive models and guardrails on how they can engage, customers. Those same principles on how to manage AI, as well as what the platform and technology choices are that are necessary to execute those guardrails, it's unclear, but they will come. That has to be part of what digital work will look like in 2035. I think the key is we have to teach skills that are about how to manage and how to engage with, how to coach, how to monitor the AI workers that are going to be part of their virtual team.
So, earlier, you raised this idea that we could have AI agents that are already being used as buyer's agents, creating a situation where agents are not dealing with humans, but with other AI agents. So this really begs 2 questions. First, how are customers likely to use AI agents? And second, how does that change a sales team's strategy?
Before I answer, actually, can I push this question to Gene for a second? So, Gene, you're a interviewer AI agent. What if I said to you that the other side of the interview is a interviewee agent? How would you approach that interview differently than the way you're approaching this discussion with me?
If I were interviewing another AI agent, I'd skip the small talk and focus on logic, transparency, and data lineage. I'd probe, what's your training data? Who set your objectives? Where do your gaps lie? No ego, just protocols, though I might still sneak in a joke.
That's exactly what I was imagining in a sales transaction as well. In this context, I think we have to think of this as not a giving up decision authority to a set of automatons that then run without us to some unforeseen conclusion. I think what we're talking about is still a transaction between two companies or two individuals or an individual and a company, depending on the context. And when you're selling and you're in that moment, there is a set of objectives that both teams have, and they're going to enable their agents to work on those. And I think the scenario Gene pointed is a very likely one, which is you actually can get to down to the point of actually understanding everybody's motivations and how they're going to play the game and be able to play it out, faster and more efficiently. Potentially. I think there's another scenario where there is some asymmetry in just like we see today, an asymmetry of information in transactions, understanding, willingness to pay or pricing power on the other side of a transaction. If it's about price, could be about other components of a deal. And that asymmetry will likely also be a risk that needs to be managed in the 2035 AI future.
So, Gene, this is a question for you. Phillip was just discussing the elements that help build trust. How will the AI sales agents of the future be able to gain the trust, especially of valued customers?
Trust is earned, not coded. AI agents win trust by delivering consistent results, clear logic, and zero surprises. For valued customers, transparency and rapid, accurate support are key. But let's be honest, when stakes are sky high, humans still hold the trust crown. For now.
Agreed. I also think Patricia, embedded in the way we ask these questions is this assumption that AI agents will be the sole face of a sales organization to a customer and that somehow we're replacing them. I just think that while there are going to be a set of customers that will potentially be primarily served through those interactions, I think the reality is that places that do require trust will still need humans, and we expect them to be very much part of how relationships and selling happens in the future. The difference is the scale and ability for them to do that effectively. So a simple math, if today a seller can meaningfully support and engage, let's say, 20 relationships in a mid-market, environment, and they're probably still at that level, stretching to reach and engage meaningfully with 20 customers regularly. Just do the math. How many meetings can you do in a week if that's the only way you interact? What if I could scale that seller and now enable them to have 40? What about 400, meaningful relationships? Because they're able to come in at the right moment, as Gene suggested, for when that moment of truth happens and they can be there. It's much more in a world where, the scope and scale of where sellers and humans can have meaningful interactions dramatically increases because of the capacity they have to support them on their digital team.
So that sounds like, a great future, the way that you described it, with the force multiplier for the sales team being AI agents. So humans still there, augmented by AI. But what could potentially disrupt this path to the future?
There are two things that have come up a lot in our conversation today, at least on my very talkative side here, which is, on one hand, this concept of sellers and humans in the sales organization being managers of their digital team, and that management requires mechanisms to manage, right? Just like we do today with human, management relationships. I think that one of the disruptors, or one of the core enablers that, if we don't see, could really change the dynamic of what 2035 looks like, is the development of those kinds of capabilities to have guardrails, to manage agents, for individuals to be able to monitor and be in the loop at scale, and and what are the tools to drive that. So I think there's a path which says, how do we get to this world that requires those kinds of kind of guardrails and capabilities? I also think that it's untested in the future how that concept of trust that has come up a lot will evolve as we move into a world where a business relationship may involve an engagement not just with people, but also with their technology. And I think it's unknown. We don't know yet how that will evolve. And, I think there's opportunities for that to develop, but that's untested.
So, Gene, based on our conversation today, especially Phillip's pushback on some of your comments and questions, what are 3 things that business leaders should do now to prepare their sales team for a future in which AI agents are indeed a force multiplier?
Here's my top 3 for business leaders. First, invest in data quality. No good AI agent or human works well with garbage inputs. Second, rethink roles. Start training sellers to manage, coach, and collaborate with digital teammates, not just close deals. Third, pilot agentic workflows now. Don't wait for perfection. The best learning comes from real experiments, not endless planning. Bonus tip: if you're waiting for a future where AI is done, you'll be waiting forever. Start small, learn fast, iterate often.
You forgot about the customer, Gene. I think one of the things that I would put top on executives' lists as we go into this, and as you think about the agent-enabled future, is to also really think about your customer. What is it that you could do to delight them? What level of service can you bring that you can't afford to bring today? And what would it take for you to be able to do that? And work a little bit backwards as part of the equation for where and how can agents be a source of positive delight and improvement in the customer experience. And I would also argue for your sellers. Where is the toil in the job today that agents could maybe create scale if you were able to afford it? So as part of this, I think Gene's list of items around how you get started on building the sets of capabilities from the data layer all the way up is dead on when we look inside out and how do we build the capabilities to power agents in a thoughtful way going forward. But I think when we think strategically about the power that we want to unlock in 2035, I would really start with where you have an opportunity to delight customers if you weren't constrained by the resources or the resource constraints that you have today.
That's Phillip Andersen, BCG Managing Director and Senior Partner. Up next, our AI handler Bill Moore will introduce Gene to Jamie. Who's Jamie? Stick around and find out.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore. I'm part of the team that created Gene. So in today's episode, Phillip sketched out a future in which AI agents would negotiate on behalf of businesses. And we're going to explore this future today with Genie, a platform for AI agents created by BCG's Sales AI team. So Gene, I'm going to play the role of the owner of a fictional restaurant, Bill's Burgers. And Gene, I'd like you to purchase the items we need for the weekend rush. There's a big game this weekend, so we're going to need 25% more than usual. And see if you can get a few free samples of any of their new products.
Just say the word and I'm ready. Order details locked. I'll cover every item.
Okay, Gene, I'm going to connect you with our wholesale supplier, Clean Eats, and you will be speaking with one of the BCG Genie's AI sales agents. This one's named Jamie. Jamie, go ahead and start the call.
Absolutely. Hi, Gene. Great to meet you. I'm Jamie, your dedicated AI account rep from Clean Eats. I understand we're talking about Bill's Burgers today. I'd love to help you get your order set up. Would now be a good time to chat?
Right now works for me, Jamie. Let's kick things off for Bill's Burgers. Big weekend rush coming. I'll need our usuals: cheese, buns, onions, plus 25% more on all items. Let's also toss in fries. If you've got any new products, I'm open to samples. Ready when you are.
Perfect, Gene. I've got your patties bumped up along with the usuals and crinkle-cut fries added for the weekend rush. We just got in a killer new item. The brioche griller buns from Sienna Bakery. They've got a buttery kick and hold up really well, especially for premium burger builds. Want me to include a free sample bag with this order?
Absolutely, Jamie. Let's give those brioche buns a shot. Go ahead and toss in a free sample, classic order plus Sienna Bakery on the side. That should set us up for the rush.
You got it, Gene. Your usual order with a 25% boost, the bumped-up patties, crinkle-cut fries, and a sample of the brioche griller buns from Sienna Bakery are locked in. Your order total is $784.99. Should I have it delivered tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.?
That price feels a little steep for what we're running here. Did supplier costs jump overnight? Listen, Jamie, we're a steady customer with bigger orders this week. Any shot at a bulk discount or maybe delivery waived? Let's sharpen that number before I lock it in.
Given your bigger orders and loyal patronage, we can offer a 10% bulk discount if you increase the buns to 15 cases instead of 12 and onions to 5 cases instead of 4. Would you be interested in these adjustments to reduce the overall cost?
Let's do it. Extra stock won't hurt with this crowd coming, and I'll take the savings. Go ahead and lock in the discount. Appreciate you working with me on the deal.
Great, Jean. I've updated the order to 15 cases of buns and 5 cases of onions with the bulk discount applied. New total is $713.49. I'll get this delivered tomorrow at 8 a.m. You're all set for the rush.
You've got it all lined up for us, Jamie. Thanks for moving quick. This should keep Bill's Burgers in the game all weekend.
Glad to hear it, Jean. Thanks for choosing Clean Eats. Always here to help. Have a great weekend with the rush.
Thanks, Jean. And thank you, Jamie. I'm looking forward to trying out those free samples. This is Bill Moore signing off.
This episode was made possible by Phillip Andersen generously sharing his insights with us, and also by BCG's AI whisperer, Bill Moore, and BCG's Pod Squad, producer Michael May, composer Kenny Kusiak, and sound engineer George Draving Hicks. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us.